What's up, everybody? Um, so today I thought I would make a little garden update. It's the biggest garden I've had in my life, and I have been trying to apply some methods that I've learned over the years and also trying a bunch of new stuff this year. And I thought it might be helpful to some other gardeners in my area or in my zone. I noticed that with a lot of these garden videos, there isn't a ton of information on where they are, which is obviously extremely important when we're talking about what grows well and what time of the year it is. So right now it is the second week of June, and this is right outside of Richmond, Virginia. So we're in zone 7B. The zone is a little weird here in Virginia. We are very close to zone 8A, so we get a little bit of kind of depends. But this year we had some cooler temperatures later in spring than expected. In early May, we had some nights that were getting down to 40 degrees. We had a very wet spell. So you'll see some plants were stunted because of that. They grew a little slower than others, but we've probably had about 14 days now where the low temperature was above 65. So things are starting to catch up and do well. I'll walk around the garden and just show you guys what I've got going on and what's working and what's not. All right, so this is something new that I've done this year, which is planting in the ground. I haven't been able to do this because I've been renting properties where, it wasn't allowed to me. So the sun actually crosses over this bed in this direction, overhead. And this bed probably gets about 6.5 hours of sunlight currently. We've got a bunch of different stuff growing in here. I'll just list them off right now. We have okra, watermelon, onions, strawberries, cucumber, multiple pepper varieties, I think 4 pepper varieties in total, and 3 different tomato varieties, also a basil plant and tomatillo, as well as thyme. And I think I may have already said okra. If I didn't, there's okra in here, and there's also a sweet tomato plant that we are experimenting with. So something that has been doing really well for me this year is my early girl tomatoes. They're just starting to blush. Like I said, we're probably just finishing the second week of June here, so that makes me happy. I think these may have been a little earlier actually if we didn't have that cold snap, but the plants were in the ground far before that, and they didn't seem to be stunted. At least the tomato plants didn't, so that's a good thing. Some of the more immature plants were stunted when that occurred, but the early girl seemed to be very cold hardy and did very well. Grew through the cold snap, set fruit through the cold snap. So it's doing really well. You'll see that I've got a ton of leaders on this. I tried to, so for this one, I just let like the first 4 or 5 main leaders grow. And then after that, I've been plucking suckers. You'll notice that on all of these tomato plants, they are very close together. At max, they're probably a little over a foot spaced apart. So I've been clearing out their underbrush and trying to create airflow through them to prevent disease, and it's been doing very well. I don't know if that's a characteristic of the hybrid varieties that I'm growing here, or if it is just that plus the fact that I have been keeping this underbrush pretty cleared out. But these early girls are doing really well for me. They're growing super well. They're setting fruit. They're continuing to set fruit on their upper branches. Immature, they're continuing to set flowers. They're continuing to grow. So I'm happy with this. I think I will be growing this variety again next year. Something we did with this is actually I got this start from a neighbor, and he started this probably early March indoors. And so it was pretty mature when it was first put into the ground. It was probably about 2 feet tall when it was first put into the ground, and it did really well with that. So I think I'll be doing that myself next year. And I'll probably grow a few of these since it did so well. But this is the early girl variety. And I think there's something like 18 fruit on this right now, or maybe more. I think maybe 24, something like that on my last count. They're hiding all in there, so it's doing very well. The next tomato plant down the line is the Beef Master, and it's my first year actually ever growing a beefsteak variety. And this one is also, let me move this leaf here. This one's also doing well, setting fruit. One thing I did notice is that these will have basically like at their first crook, they'll set a flower, and that flower set seems to be having the largest fruit for me. One thing I did notice with this variety is that these will have big blossom scars on them, and they can have very strange splitting when they're first setting the fruit. I think I mistake a good amount of that splitting for tomato fruitworm damage, and so I pulled those. Here's a good example of one. Let me see if I can get zoom in on that. Get it to focus here. And so I think that is actually just a naturally occurring split, not fruitworm damage. I did pull probably the two earliest tomatoes I had, thinking that it was fruitworm damage. And I did spray. I did spray all these plants once with a pesticide, a non-organic pesticide. But I haven't seen any damage since then. So I think it was just strange splitting. For all of my beefsteaks, I've put them, since I'm using tomato cages and not like a weave or anything like that, I've put them to 2 main leaders, and the leaders are setting more fruit as they go up. So hopefully we'll have, it's not as productive as I was hoping it would be. I might switch to a different beefsteak variety next year, depending on how this one does. I have 4 plants of this in total, so we'll see what it does throughout the season. We have sun golds next. Sun golds are a variety that grow prolifically in, at least in my area outside of Richmond, Virginia, in zone 7B. These things go nuts. I mean, you basically find these in every garden in the area, and it's for good reason. I think I came out here 2 weeks ago, and across my 4 plants, I counted 112 set fruits, set tomatoes, and something like, probably double that in terms of possible sets with blossoms and things like that. So hopefully throughout the season, it's going to be more cherry tomatoes, more sun gold cherry tomatoes than I can eat. This isn't another hybrid variety, so can't save the seeds from these, unfortunately. We'll have to get starts from nurseries next year again, but I will grow these as long as I have a garden. I will be growing sun golds inside of Virginia in 7B. Let's take a look here. This is another beef master that was put in a little later. It's doing well. It's setting fruit. The fruit's not quite as big, but to be fair, this was put in the ground probably 3 weeks after the other beef master that you saw down there. You can see that I need to get in here and weed, so that will be done today. Let's see here. This is another sun gold, immature, was put in the ground at the same time as this beef master, just growing prolifically. With the sun golds, it's really the same thing. I basically keep it to, on the cherry tomatoes, I keep it to about 3 main leaders, and I let those grow as tall as I want, and then I try to, if I find like a sucker up here, like this one that's higher up, I just get rid of that. I don't want those, so. You could grow those, though. I mean, that's the thing with these sun golds, is that they're so prolific, you could never pluck a sucker on them, the entire time that they grow, and just let them bush out completely, and you'd have as much fruit as me, I'm sure. And I've been plucking the suckers. So it's just something to consider and something to experiment with in my mind. For pepper varieties, we're growing some varieties that I've never grown before, and they seem to be doing well. The first one is these poblanos. This plant is probably a good, 2.5 feet tall now and bushing out. It probably is competing for light, which is why it's so tall so quickly, but that's fine. I don't really care. As long as I get some peppers, I have so many plants, as long as they look healthy, I don't care if they get particularly leggy. You probably notice, this poblano is pretty far down on the stem here, and I didn't pluck it. Some people will pluck their first fruit that's set to try to have the plant focus on growth, but I just left it, whatever. We have jalapeno here. We have jalapeno here, and they're both doing well. They're starting to set fruit. Which is good. This is about the time that I've experienced them in the past, setting fruit early June, and then they will continue to grow and set fruit through the end of August, and then into September. That generally in September is when I start to see my jalapenos in this area turn red. I generally pick them before they turn red, though. We have a serrano plant. We have a few of these throughout the garden. The serranos have seemed to do really well with the heat. Some of these other plants have done a little, they've no sun bleaching on the leaves or anything like that, but toward the end of the day, as a defense mechanism for all the straight heat, you'll start to see the top stems bend down, but it's really not something that I worry about. They tend to stand back up. Growing habanero. These habaneros did not like the cold weather. They definitely got stunted. They got stunted at about, I would say they're about all maybe 6 inches. and then they bushed. In the past 2 weeks, like I said, we've been getting a lot of heat, and these things have started to stand up tall, and they're doing well. This is one of the experiments that I've been doing, which is okra. I've been told by a lot of other people that okra grows like prolifically in this area. It loves the heat. And so that's one thing is, you know, I try to take the advice of others when it comes to their failures and their successes. If they have already told me something works, it's a good idea for me to believe them. You know, I'm no master gardener, so I take advice where I can get it. Just an experiment. This is another experiment that I'm doing. It's watermelon. You know, I've grown cantaloupe in the past, but I've never grown an actual watermelon before. This is the Black Diamond hybrid, or variety. It's an heirloom variety, so I guess I could save the seeds from it. And you know, the start that I got had 2 vines right next to each other, and I figured in an open garden like this, where they're not in a container, I'm trying to plant them very close to each other and see what happens, basically. This is an okra flower. That's not from the watermelon. It's an experiment. I think if I were to plant this next year, I would have thinned this small start. Obviously this one took off, and this one's looking a little bit worse for wear, a little smaller. It's been taking its time, but I think they'll both do well in the end. We're growing onions this year, which is a first for me as well. I went ahead and spooned them, and they are starting to bulb out, so I'm feeling happy with those, and we'll just continue to monitor them and see how they do throughout the season. Again, just crazy gangbusters with weeds in here. Gonna get in here today and take care of that. Another experiment I started this season is the sweet potato. We have some in containers. We threw one in the bed just to see if there's any difference. This variety was stunted. Again, I think particularly with sweet potatoes, they need very warm soil temperatures is what I've learned. They are taking off, but they're definitely slower than I was expecting. And they seem, I don't know what beetle it is that's attacking their leaves. It might be flea beetles because of the small holes in the leaves, but they seem to be being attacked by pests as well, at least the greens. We also have cucumbers growing. This is a burpless variety. I forget exactly what variety it is, but it's doing well. This is the first year I've made a trellis system like this. Basically just tied it and then placed screws into the plank here to keep the rope from falling down as these plants start to weigh more. Strawberries, normally do them in containers, doing them in the garden this year, and they're doing pretty well. We have a few, you know, that will be ready to be picked in the next couple days. I'm hoping to winter this over. I'm just going to cover it with pine duff, and hopefully next year all these runners that I've set, I'm just letting all the runners set into the ground will come back, and the more mature plants will come back for their second year. And hopefully next year we have a big old strawberry patch at this end of the garden. One thing that I have been struggling with is my basil. In previous years, actually, unknowingly, I've planted basil in areas that don't get direct sunlight all day long, and my basil plants do much better. But you can see here, this guy gets basically full sun all day, and he does have leaf damage, and I'm pretty sure that this is from over sun exposure. But, you know, it's okay. That's one where if I have to buy my basil in the store, it's not the end of the world. Over here we have another poblano. This one's doing well. We have this one in a container. We did have 2 growing here originally, but this one actually outcompeted the other one, and the other one died, so we just pulled it. We figured, you know, it's kind of that situation of the strongest survive, so he didn't make it, and because of that, he's gone. Nice and healthy from the top. All right, so over here we have the sweet potatoes that I have growing in containers, as well as some gourds, some bird feeder gourds, and a basil plant. This basil plant actually just became a sacrificial plant. I think that this is Asiatic beetle damage. I've seen them on the pepper plants, and they have the same damage, as well as this like brown and black goop that has dried up. I think that that's got to be their poop probably, but I've been leaving this one here. It's just been getting destroyed by bugs. I figured it can be a sacrifice. I'll probably go get a beetle trap probably this afternoon, because I'm starting to see that this one has run out of leaves, and it looks like the beetles are switching to my sweet potato leaves now. These are sweet potatoes. Can't remember the exact variety on these, unfortunately, which I know is not very helpful, but I do have a tip for growing sweet potatoes in this zone, especially in this part of Virginia. You know, they're a vine and they seem to grow fairly prolifically. and we have a really late growing season. So next year, I am not going to be antsy to get these in containers. This year we got them in containers. We put the slips in probably May 2nd, I think. And then we had 2 weeks of cold temperatures, and it stunted all of these plants terribly. But they're doing better now. They are getting beetle damage. Like I said, this is all new from last night. I think that basil plant is no longer choice for the beetles, and so they've moved on to this. So I will be getting a trap for them tonight. We have another container here, and then we have a second variety in the other container garden that I'll show later. But these are doing well now that the soil has warmed up. They're growing their vines out, so that's awesome to see. These are the bird feeder gourds. We got these in, I would say, look, we were checking the soil, see how moist it was yesterday. We got these in, this would have been probably June 1st, or maybe halfway through the first week in June. They're doing well. The plan is just to trellis them against the fence and see if we can get some bird feeder gourds. They're doing really great in this container. This is just, I think it's like Miracle Grow potting soil mix that we've also mixed in. I put a bunch of lime in there, put a bunch of organic fertilizer in there, and mix it up, and they've been taking really well. These ones were put into this container. We had sweet potatoes in here. The sweet potatoes were so stunted from the cold weather, I think because this planter is up in the air, was getting hit by wind, and the soil temp was truly too low for them. So those sweet potatoes didn't recover, so we pulled them and we put more bird feeder gourds in here. And we're having similar issues. These guys are slow. I think it's because this soil mix has so much sand in it. We had tried to mix sand in with topsoil for the sweet potatoes to see if that would help them form better potatoes, and it seems that it's created a drainage issue. We think that the sand has settled at the bottom of the container, or the fact that this pot or this container is lined with this landscaper material. What am I trying to say here? Cloth. I think that that's part of the issue too. It's just really wet soil, doesn't drain well, and things are having issues. We think that they're having issues setting good roots down in there. So we'll just see how these go. If they die, that's a lesson learned for next year. All right, this is the second container garden. We've got a bunch of stuff going on here. New plants that I've never grown before, plants that I have grown before. Things are doing really well. Some things are not doing as well. One thing that we tried was, like I said, it's our first year ever growing onions. So we're gonna try some in containers, and they're just not doing well. I don't know what it is about these containers. Maybe it's the soil is too compacted. Maybe it's the watering is wrong. But next year, I think we will put plants that are more suited to grow into containers into these containers, peppers, things of that nature, and probably keep the onions to the garden bed itself. But we're leaving them in. We'll just see what happens. When we harvest the others, we'll harvest these, and if they do, these might be the ones that we eat fresh if they're small, or if they're inedible, we won't eat them, and we've learned a lesson. That's a really big part of gardening is, coming out here and thinking about what's going on. Here's the bastard I'm talking about. This is an Asiatic beetle. And these things, I think, are what's fucking up all my plants. So I'm actually gonna take this son of a bitch. Look, he's trying to be scary, putting it up. Oh, and there he goes. I should have killed him. I'll kill him later. I always, in all of my gardens, I always get just a butterfly bush. It probably could winter these over. I haven't tried, to be honest with you. I know that they, if they're in the ground, they winter over like nothing, and we get deep frosts and deep freezes here in this part of Virginia, even though we are, in a warmer zone for Virginia. But even still, we get, this year we had something like 12 inches of snow. So, we do get frosted over. In a container, it might be fine. I know in the ground, it definitely would be. I always just plant them. It brings in pollinators. Same thing with I think that this is either lemon balm or catmint, I forget. It's like 3 years old. And basically what I do is every year I let whatever's come back, I let it go straight to flower. And then toward the end of the season, I'll cut back all of these flowered parts, and the new growth will hopefully come up next year. This is more peppers here. We've got 2 going in 1 container. One thing I have done with these containers, it's hard to tell, but I've buried them about 4 inches into the ground, and it's been helping a lot because this container garden gets direct sun as well. This actually gets more sun, more direct sunlight than my garden plot that's in the ground. So to try to help maintain soil temperature, I've put them in the ground to try to regulate that. It also helps with watering. We also put a layer of mulch over the top, so that's been helping as well to maintain moisture. Huh, that's a bug I've never seen before. Gonna have to look that one up. Who knows? So these are all poblano. Both of these are poblano. They are finally starting to set fruit, and we will see how they look in time to come. We have another additional poblano there, and I swore I had another pepper in this garden somewhere. Oh, the other container I moved over by the garden. This one actually just was brought to me yesterday. We think that this is a ghost pepper. We don't really remember. We are growing tomatillos for the first time. We have 2 in 5-gallon containers, and then my buddy Aiden brought over one. He started in a 3-gallon grow bag. We'll just see what happens. That's the thing is, people talk about, oh, you should grow a tomato in a 5-gallon container or more, probably similar with tomatillo, but in my experience, it's just smaller container. It's like a fish: smaller tank, smaller fish, smaller container, smaller plant. A 3-gallon container won't stop this thing from flowering and setting fruit, but it will stop it from growing massively. So honestly, for a container garden, I'm okay with that. We have another one of those beef masters over here that I put into a pot. This is the same thing. The pot is buried, and one thing that I am noticing is that despite what I would consider good growing conditions and a healthy plant, this one is setting far less fruit than any of my others. This only has 4 tomatoes on it right now. It seems that basically per flower cluster we get 1 fruit, and so that might be just a facet of it being in a container. This one has been fertilized as the others have been, using a Happy Frog vegetable tomato mixture. Just top dressing with it and watering it in. I've done that once for all of these so far this season. So I think next year I'll probably stick to, either a cherry tomato variety, something like a Roma, something like a determinate variety in the container, if I'm going to do any more in containers, and leave the larger tomato varieties like the Early Girls or the Beef Masters. I'll keep those in the ground, I think, because they just seem to do better there. This is the same though, 2 liters. I let it come up to its first main split, and then from there I prune off any suckers that start to form, just keeping it to 2 liters. We're growing eggplant for the first time. Black Beauties and the eggplant are doing well. We've got our first fruit setting here. Basically, drop the old phone there. Let's see here. Basically what I've done is I've kept all the suckers off until after the first fruit set. After the first fruit set, I'm allowing them to grow multiple liters. And this is the first time I've ever grown eggplant. We'll see how it goes. Something I would change next year is container size. I think I underestimated how large these plants can get, so I've put 2 into this small container. I think next year for a container of this size, I would probably leave a single plant in there, even though these both look healthy, and I think I will get fruit off of both of them. Oops, got a wasp landing on me. Let's see here. Something else new that I'm trying for the first time is bush cucumber. Previously, when I've planted cucumber in containers, I've always had powdery mildew issues, and I've heard that bush cucumbers are more hardy, so hopefully these do not suffer from that. Probably what I will do here in a little bit, maybe after they put out another leaf or 2, is I will come through and I will prune off these leaves that are closest to the ground, still being very careful not to get the leaves wet when I water it. But we'll see how it goes. An additional eggplant, again, burying the container, trying to keep it healthy. We've got a flower setting on this one. It's looking healthy. There is some leaf damage there. Another tomatillo, another eggplant, and then a secondary variety of sweet potato. This one's not doing as well. Same soil as the others, same conditions as the others, put into the ground at the same time. But I think that, like I said, sweet potatoes really need warm soil. And I think that cold snap that we had in early May affected this variety of sweet potato more than the other. So what I would recommend is, if you are going to be antsy like we did and put them into the ground at the very beginning of the recommended season, make sure that you're getting a cold hardy variety, or else you may end up, I'm sure that this one is just less cold hardy in terms of variety than the other one is. There's no difference in how it's planted or how we've been keeping up with it, or its feeding schedule or watering schedule or anything like that, and it's just not doing quite as well as the other variety. So I can only, the only other variable there is the soil conditions, like temperature. So I think that may be part of it. It's got no pest pressure or anything along those lines. So I think that's probably the main reason why it's not doing quite as well. So that's it. I just wanted to make a specific video for my growing environment because, you know, as I'm sure a lot of us right now in this day and age, you know, the major resource, at least that I use when I'm looking for advice for my garden, if I'm not speaking to my neighbors, who luckily I have great gardener neighbors. To my right directly is a guy who's been gardening for, you know, longer than I've been alive, and I would consider him a master gardener. He's been doing really well. And then to my left, I've got a guy who is more into the permaculture side of things, and he grows most of his his annuals in containers, and so he's been giving me great tips for container planting. But if I'm not going to them for advice, I'm going to the internet. And I have found that the internet is, the advice that I find there is not as specific as I would like, or the experience that I can see there from other people is not as specific as I would like for my zone and my specific area. And so I thought I would, you know, start that trend and be a resource for other gardeners in my area, share some of my experiences, what my failures have been, what I'm planning on doing for next season, what things are working really well for me. And I think it's very important as a gardener to do that. You know, it's like that cliche saying about insanity, trying the same thing and expecting it to work when it doesn't. That really applies to gardening. You know, you can't fail multiple times over multiple seasons. You could lose your interest in the hobby, you know, if that's the case. And so I just think it's important to, you know, especially at this point in the year where really, you know, I'm not planting anything else. These plants are all established. You know, I might be going through and pruning them every once in a while, but I'm not making any major changes at this point. I'm weeding. But so the gardening activities are going down. It's important to, at that point, start to go out into your garden and walk around and take a real inventory of what's working well and what's not, to try to be, you know, I personally become very emotionally attached to my garden. It's important to try to be objective, take a look at it, see what's working, what's not working, take criticism, you know, take advice from others, and plan for next year. A great way to do that is in a gardening journal. That's something that I've been working on this year a lot, is a gardening journal. I just write down, you know, specific dates. I write down what I'm seeing in the garden, what I'm noticing, what I'm thinking. And my plan is over the winter, I'll give that journal a read, refresh my memory, think, oh yeah, you know, I gotta remember, plant those sweet potatoes later, put those Beefmaster varieties in the ground. You know, maybe reduce the amount of direct sunlight that my peppers and containers are getting. Despite them being a heat-loving plant, you know, 8 hours of direct sunlight can make them struggle and make them a little stressed. Early June, start, you know, preemptively look to stop those Asiatic beetles. All right, well, I'll probably make another one of these later on in the month, or maybe early in July. And just so that, like I said, gardeners in my area, in my specific zone, in my area, can have a resource to just look at somebody else's garden and say, oh, this person is doing this differently than I am and it's working for them, or this person isn't doing this thing that I'm doing and I'm noticing that they're struggling. All right, awesome. I hope you guys have a good day, and thank you for watching the video.